It started the night I found an email that seemed innocent enough on the surface, a hotel reservation for a night I wasn't informed about. My wife Lisa and I were known in our neighborhood as that picture perfect couple. We'd host barbecues, attend community events, and throw these legendary holiday parties that had the whole neighborhood talking. But that night, as I looked at that email on her laptop, a gut feeling kicked in. There was no reason for her to be staying at a hotel. None at all. I started connecting dots I didn't want to see. Flashes of her unusual absences, moments she was more distant, and her sudden insistence on me playing golf on certain weekends. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Something was up, and it was my turn to figure out what. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I played along. The following weekend, I made sure to mention I'd be out late with the guys, giving her the freedom she seemed to crave. Sure enough, she jumped at the chance to get dressed up, saying she was going to a friend's for a quiet night in. But I knew better. I followed her. She didn't go to her friend's. She went to a luxury hotel across town. From my car parked outside, I watched as she walked in. Not 10 minutes later, another car pulled up. A man I didn't recognize at first stepped out, looking smug and far too pleased with himself as he joined her inside. I couldn't stand it. I needed to confront her. But not just any confrontation. It had to be a moment she'd never forget. And as the hours passed while they were inside, my plan started taking shape. The next day, I spent all morning getting ready. I went to a local party supply store and got what I needed to set up something special, a small display of their sins. I made copies of that hotel reservation and printed out a few photos of them entering the hotel, thanks to a friend's security camera positioned at just the right angle. I wasn't a tech genius, but I figured a way to make those images clear enough for anyone to recognize who they were. By evening, I'd set up everything on our front lawn. I placed a projector in the middle, aimed at our garage door, showing a repeating loop of those photos. Lisa entering, the man joining her. I even added text, "Guess who's been sneaking around?" As the sun went down, I heard the familiar hum of her car in the driveway. Her face when she saw the setup was priceless. She looked from the projector to me standing in the front yard, arms crossed, every ounce of the heartbreak and betrayal on my face. She was frozen for a second, the color drained from her face, and then she screamed, a piercing, gut-wrenching scream that had half the neighborhood's lights flickering on. She turned to run, and who was there to catch her? Her lover, who had followed her back to make sure she was okay. I guess he wasn't expecting the whole neighborhood to be watching either. She fainted right into his arms, the neighbors stepping out on their porches and peeking through blinds, murmuring and staring at the spectacle unfolding in front of them. There was no way to undo the damage by then. That night, her betrayal wasn't just between us anymore. She'd lied to me, her husband, and she'd shown her true self to everyone who once thought of her as part of our perfect couple. As much as I wanted to let that shocking moment be her final undoing, I knew I couldn't just leave it at that. I had been betrayed in a way that felt like a stab in the back, a slap in the face, and a shot to the heart all at once. I wanted more than just a scene. I wanted justice, and I was ready to fight for it. After she fainted in her lover's arms, the paramedics were called. Neighbors gathered around us, whispering among themselves, catching on to the reason for the projector show in the yard. When Lisa came to, the guilt in her eyes was unmistakable, and her lover, the smug idiot, couldn't even look me in the face. "I hope you enjoyed the show," I said to him, my fists clenched, "because this is only the beginning." I walked up to him, practically nose to nose, feeling my restraint slip. I saw his hand tremble, but he held his ground. He looked like he was about to stammer out some half-hearted apology or excuse, but I wasn't having it. I swung, a clean right hook that landed square on his jaw, sending him stumbling back onto our driveway. He scrambled to his feet, barely steady. "You think you can just show up, ruin my life, and walk away?" I spat. A flash of anger crossed his face, and suddenly he squared up, lifting his fists. He swung, aiming for my face, but I ducked and hit him in the ribs, hearing him grunt in pain. He doubled over, and I landed another punch, watching him crumple down onto the driveway. "Enough!" Lisa screamed, finally snapping out of her daze. She staggered between us, holding up her hands like she was some kind of peacemaker. Just stop it. This is out of control. Out of control? I laughed bitterly. You have no idea what out of control is. You brought this on yourself, Lisa. Our neighbors started to crowd in closer, murmuring louder now, a mix of shock and pity flashing across their faces. The man scrambled up, rubbing his jaw, his face twisted with rage. He managed to spit out, "I didn't come here for this circus. You can keep her." With that, he stormed off down the street, too rattled to go back to his car, practically limping as he walked away from the chaos he'd helped create. Good riddance. I turned back to Lisa, her eyes brimming with anger and tears as she looked at me, maybe expecting me to feel pity. But I had none left. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, yet filled with years of heartbreak and betrayal. "You threw away everything we built, all for that?" She looked away, the guilt on her face replaced by something ugly. Defiance. I was never happy, okay? Maybe if you'd been around more, you would have noticed. That was it. The words hit harder than any punch ever could. All those nights working overtime, pushing myself to give us a life I thought we both wanted. And now she had the nerve to turn it back on me? "Well, if you wanted me gone so bad," I replied, my voice steady and ice cold, "then congratulations. You got it." She gaped at me as I walked past her and into the house, slamming the door behind me. Inside, I was ready to tear through everything that reminded me of her. But instead, I took a deep breath, my eyes drifting to the piles of things around the house. The things we'd bought together, the photos, the memories. They were only memories now, hollow ones. And they didn't matter to me anymore. The next day, I went straight to a lawyer. I wanted her out of the house and out of my life. By the time I was done signing papers, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in ages: freedom. No more walking on eggshells, no more sacrificing myself for someone who had nothing but contempt for me. But then came the final blow. I learned that despite her infidelity, Lisa was still entitled to half of what we had built together, including the house, all the investments, even my retirement fund. It was like getting kicked while I was down. But I was done taking the hits lying down. I went to the garage and began packing up everything of hers, dropping it into trash bags and leaving it at the curb. When she showed up that evening, shocked and furious, I just handed her the divorce papers and told her she was free. "You want it out? Well, here it is. Take it and get out." She started to say something, but I didn't care to hear it. I watched as she stormed back to her car, kicking one of the bags on her way, slamming the car door so hard I thought the window would shatter. But I just watched her drive off, finally feeling that peace I'd been fighting for. The whole neighborhood had witnessed her betrayal, seen her scream and faint as her dirty secret came out. They knew everything now, and there was no way she could spin it. For once, she was the villain in her own story, and everyone around us knew it. As for me, I'd lost a marriage, but I'd found myself again. And that was all the justice I needed. In the weeks that followed, I barely saw Lisa. She came by the house to grab the last of her things, and every time, she left without a word. The place was mine now, but it felt empty, almost haunted by the memories of the life we'd built together, one I thought was unbreakable. I'd done everything I could to hold my head high, but inside I was furious, hollowed out. I didn't want her to have half of everything. It wasn't fair. Then, a friend from work gave me an idea. A little spark that I could get justice and maybe some closure too. "Get a good lawyer," he said. "Fight her tooth and nail. There are ways to expose her for what she's done, and courts don't always look kindly on cheaters." I took his advice. I called up a hard-hitting lawyer who specialized in cases like mine. This guy had a reputation for playing rough but fair, and he told me straight up, "If you're willing to dig, we might just make this hurt less financially. Cheating doesn't always matter in divorce cases, but sometimes it does. Let's make sure you're not the one getting burned." So I handed over everything I had: bank statements, the evidence from the hotel, all the photos from that night in the yard. We even gathered statements from neighbors who'd witnessed the whole scene. I went through her credit card charges, looking for anything that might prove she'd used joint money to bankroll her affair. And with every bit of evidence we uncovered, I felt that rage bubble up again, but this time with a purpose. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her walk away with my hard-earned savings. The day of the court hearing, I walked in with my lawyer by my side, feeling a strange, powerful calm. She walked in with her own attorney, looking like a stranger to me. Cold, polished, like she'd been coached on how to play the part of the wronged wife. She barely glanced my way, and I realized that the person I'd loved for so many years didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. The hearing was brutal. My lawyer laid out everything in front of the judge: photos of her with her lover, testimony from neighbors about her fainting and screaming in his arms in front of everyone. The judge looked over it all with a neutral face. But every once in a while, I caught a flicker of something, like he saw through her act. Then came the real punch. My lawyer argued that because Lisa had used joint funds to finance her affair, she was liable for reimbursing me. I watched as her face dropped, her eyes wide with disbelief. The judge didn't give her a chance to put on the show she'd been hoping for. Instead, he ordered her to reimburse me for every expense she'd racked up on that affair. The hotels, the fancy dinners, even a spa retreat she'd once billed as a mental health getaway. In the end, she didn't walk away with half of everything. Not even close. She left the courthouse looking pale, her lawyer muttering something to her, while I felt an odd sense of calm. It wasn't joy or triumph, just the relief that justice had been served, that her betrayal had real consequences. But the fallout didn't stop there. Word spread fast, and pretty soon, the whole neighborhood knew about the outcome. Friends who'd once looked at us as the perfect couple now saw me as the guy who'd been wronged, the one who'd fought back and didn't let himself be trampled. The looks of pity I'd been getting were replaced with nods of respect, a sense that people finally understood what I'd been through. Then one day, weeks after the hearing, I got a call from Lisa. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, her voice was shaky. "I just wanted to apologize," she stammered, "for everything. I never thought it would end up like this." I could hear the regret in her voice, the realization that she'd burned her life down over a fling, a stupid affair that had cost her everything. I took a deep breath, feeling that last bit of anger melt away. I wasn't looking for her apology, didn't need her guilt. But in that moment, I realized that I was free, that her remorse wasn't my burden to bear. "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Lisa," I said quietly. "I'm done with this. Goodbye." And with that, I hung up, letting her words drift away like smoke. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt like I could finally breathe. I'd fought for myself, stood my ground, and come out the other side stronger. Whatever came next, I knew I'd face it on my terms. After that call from Lisa, I thought I'd reached the end of our story. I thought I could close the book, walk away, and start fresh. But then a mutual friend, one who'd witnessed the whole spectacle, mentioned something that caught my attention. Lisa's lover, the smug guy she'd risked everything for? Apparently, he was still bragging around town about his conquest. Word was that he'd been telling people he didn't actually care about Lisa, that she'd been an easy score, just another thrill to him. That's when something inside me snapped. It was one thing for Lisa to betray me, but to find out that she was just a joke to this guy. I wasn't letting that slide. If he thought he could get away with wrecking my marriage, leaving me with the mess, and then strutting around town, he was in for a nasty surprise. The next few weeks, I spent every spare moment gathering intel on him. It wasn't hard. Turns out, he wasn't exactly cautious. I found out where he worked, which happened to be at a competitor's company in the same industry. Even better, I dug up evidence that he'd been using his position to manipulate and exploit relationships for personal gain. And I had friends with influence, who knew exactly how to leverage that information. I sent anonymous tips to his company's HR department, laying out his shady dealings with enough detail that they couldn't ignore it. Then, I made a few calls to his boss's boss, tipping him off about the kind of reputation this guy was bringing to their company. By the end of the month, he'd lost his job, and his professional reputation was in tatters. But I didn't stop there. I found out he had a girlfriend, the kind of woman who wouldn't tolerate betrayal. I sent her everything: the photos, the hotel bills, the records of his sleazy bragging. I left nothing out. When she saw it all, she dumped him on the spot, airing every detail online for everyone to see. In the span of a few weeks, his life had gone from smooth sailing to a complete disaster, and there wasn't a soul left in town who didn't know his dirty laundry. I didn't think I'd hear from him again. But then one night, my phone rang, and it was him, seething, barely able to get words out. "You think you can just ruin my life?" he spat, his voice trembling with rage. "Ruin your life?" I laughed, the sound cold and empty. "I'm just balancing the scales." "You're insane," he shouted. "You can't do this. I didn't do anything you didn't do to yourself. You wanted a game? Well, you played it with the wrong guy." And with that, I hung up, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction settle over me. A few days later, I got a final message from Lisa. It was short, pathetic, barely coherent. She'd heard what happened to her lover, and now she was pleading with me, begging for one last chance. She claimed she'd made a mistake, that she'd been confused and lost. But the truth was clear. The life she'd traded our marriage for had crumbled, and now she had nowhere else to go. I didn't even reply. Instead, I sent her a single photo, a shot of our empty home, the yard where her secret had been exposed, the driveway where she'd fainted into her lover's arms. I wanted her to see the life she'd destroyed, to know that her choices had left her with nothing. Then I blocked her number, deleted her emails, and left every reminder of her in the past where it belonged. In the weeks that followed, I rebuilt my life from the ground up. I threw out the furniture she'd picked, repainted the walls, and started fresh. Neighbors came by to check on me, some apologizing for taking her side, others congratulating me on finally getting my own justice. And one night, as I sat alone on my porch, looking out at the quiet street, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I had nothing left of that old life, no trace of the betrayal, no reminders of the pain. All that was left was me, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. And for the first time, I realized that was more than enough. After everything I'd been through, I figured the worst was behind me. But every time I passed Lisa's parents in town or ran into them at community events, they acted like I was the villain, like I was the one who'd hurt their daughter. They'd give me these judgmental looks, whispering loudly about how people change or how some marriages just fail. It was like they had erased their daughter's betrayal and painted me as the bad guy. These were the same people who, during our marriage, used to practically worship me. I'd helped fix their roof, repainted their whole house one summer, even loaned them money when Lisa's dad had fallen behind on some bills. But now, it was like none of that mattered. They saw only what they wanted to see. And in their eyes, I was the problem. After a while, their smugness got to me. It was like they were trying to rewrite history, shifting the blame onto me to protect Lisa's reputation. They'd even started telling mutual friends that I'd been too hard on her, that I was controlling, spreading whatever lies they thought would make her look like the innocent one. Well, I had one last move to make. I had a stash of things from our marriage that I'd kept as a backup, a folder with everything I had collected on her affair, from the hotel receipts to photos of her and her lover, and screenshots of texts between her and her parents where they actually encouraged her to leave me if she wasn't happy. They'd painted me as some kind of obstacle in her life, pushing her towards that life with her fling. It was as if they'd blessed her betrayal. One evening, I made a few quiet visits to people I knew well, the kind who didn't care for drama but would have a hard time staying silent if they knew the truth. I let them see everything, made sure they understood the real story. I didn't embellish anything, didn't have to. The evidence spoke for itself. Within days, the whispers started, only this time, they were about Lisa and her parents. People began questioning how her family could stand by her after what she'd done, and word spread that her parents had pushed her to walk away from our marriage. Suddenly, the friends they had in town were avoiding them, and people at their church started giving them the same cold stares they'd once given me. Then came the real blow. Someone, one of those mutual friends, leaked the story to the local community board online. By the next morning, All the dirty details were out in the open. Our small town ate it up like wildfire. People weren't just talking about Lisa's affair, they were talking about her parents' role in it, how they'd encouraged her, and how they'd turned their backs on me after everything I'd done for their family. Lisa's parents were humiliated. Her father's business took a hit when a few clients canceled contracts, choosing to take their business elsewhere. People he'd known for years didn't want anything to do with him, now that they knew what he and his wife had supported. Their so-called social standing vanished practically overnight. I never thought I'd feel satisfaction watching it all play out, but I did. It wasn't about revenge for me anymore. It was about clearing my name and making sure the truth came out. I'd endured enough lies, betrayal, and backstabbing. If they wanted to rebuild their lives, they'd have to do it with the truth hanging over their heads. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of peace. My life was moving forward, finally free from the weight of everything they'd put me through. I didn't need their approval, didn't need their fake support. All I needed was the truth to come out, and now that it had, I was ready to leave that chapter behind me for good. In the weeks after the dust settled, life finally started to feel normal again. The town had moved on to the next piece of gossip, Lisa's family was keeping a low profile, and I was free of their judgment and their twisted version of events. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. My life was my own again. But just as I was beginning to settle into this newfound peace, Lisa showed up at my door one evening looking worn down and different, as if life had finally caught up with her. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red, and for once she didn't carry herself with that familiar confidence. She just looked lost. "What do you want, Lisa?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. She swallowed, glancing down as if rehearsing the words. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly, "for everything." I didn't say anything, just watched her, feeling a mix of pity and disbelief. "I know I hurt you," she went on, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was stupid. I was selfish. And now, I've lost everything because of it. My parents, they're ashamed. They don't even talk to me the same way. And him?" She trailed off, her eyes glazing with tears. "He moved on too. Left me the moment things got complicated." I stood there waiting for her to get to the point. An apology from her now meant little, but it felt good hearing her finally acknowledge it. "I don't know what you expect me to say, Lisa," I replied, not unkindly. "We had something real. I gave you everything, and you threw it away without a second thought." "I know," she whispered, looking down, "and I have to live with that." A long silence hung between us. I could tell she was hoping for some sort of forgiveness, a gesture, anything to lighten her guilt. But I didn't owe her that, and I wasn't going to make her feel better. She'd made her choices, and they'd led her here. Finally, she looked up at me, eyes filled with regret. "I just wanted you to know I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Without another word, she turned and walked down the porch steps, disappearing into the evening shadows. I watched her go, feeling a strange relief wash over me. Her apology, though hollow, was a final confirmation that I'd done the right thing by walking away, by letting her bear the weight of her own decisions. The months that followed were some of the best of my life. I sold the house, moved into a smaller place on the edge of town, and got back into old hobbies I'd neglected for years. I reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with and even started dating again. Though I took things slow, I wanted to make sure this new chapter was one I wrote on my terms. I'd built myself back up from the ground, stronger and wiser than before. And as I looked at the life I'd created, free from deceit, free from betrayal, I realized I'd found something Lisa could never take from me: peace. The final piece of closure came one evening when I ran into one of our old neighbors at the grocery store. She looked at me with a knowing smile and said, "You know, you're better off now. Everybody knows what happened and they know the truth. You don't owe anyone anything. Enjoy your life." And I did. For the first time, I really, truly did. The chapter with Lisa was over, and my life was finally my own. And that was more satisfying than any revenge ever could be.